Alright, now we're going to get started making a belt like Payne. You open up Adobe Fireworks, I'm using CS3. You familiarize yourself with your workspace. You see I put all the tools on the right. Now what you want to do is Control-N, make a new document, and you make it 800 by 400, resolution 72 with a transparent canvas. Once you've got that made, that's how it looks. Then you start familiarizing yourself with your tools. Now you're going to be using the pen tool and the arrow tools a lot. You're also going to be using the shapes tools. Now what you want to do is start with a grid. You give yourself a grid 10 by 10 and you show it and you snap to it. You make the grid color anything you want as long as it shows against your belt. What you also want to do is you want to make some guides. You want to make a vertical guide at 400 and then you want to make a horizontal guide at 200. There you go. You double click them just to make sure of that. Once you've done that, you now have your guides, you now have your grid, you can start working. You can practically start from any point, but I suggest the center. You take your shape tools and you start making shape. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to try to duplicate this belt right here that Payne made in his tutorial. Only we're going to try to make it for another company. Now, what you see here, that arrow is over on the new layer tool. So you want to make sure each plate is on a new layer. Now, you select your circle tool. The Alt key is your friend. You drag out from the center and you start making the shapes. Now, you make the two shapes. You select both of them and then you go under the Transform Combine Paths Union, which is Control-Alt-U. Remember, shortcut keys are your friend. Now what you want to do is you want to duplicate that. Now you want to use the shortcut key because if you use the menu, then you're going to get it out of place. You use the shortcut key Control-Shift-D. We're doing this all on a PC. Now you want to make sure your colors are to your liking. I like this color right here, so I just made them that shade of gold. You want to make sure both of them are that shade of gold and not just one of them. Okay, maybe I didn't like it so much. You want to make sure the bottom layer, make sure you hide your top layer for now. The bottom layer should be getting an inner bevel. Make the angle 90 degrees and then you set any of the other options to anything you want, except for the opacity be 100. Make sure, yeah, there you go. Make sure it's raised because that's how you want them to look. You save it as a style, I saved it as gold plate, TEW. So I can call it back later on. There you go, you have your color. And now what you want to do is you want to go to the top layer. You want to make sure the top layer is the same color as the bottom layer, but not in the fill, but rather in the stroke. You want to make your fill transparent. Now, if you were smart, you selected both your layers and made it inner bevel so that you could just work on that. Now, what you want to do is you want to put a banner on. So you open up a banner, a clip art preferably, and then you use that magic wand tool right there. You want to select everything around it and then select inverse so that you just select the banner. You copy it, Control-C, you paste it, Control-V, and there you have it in your document. Now we're going to trace around it like you see that I did here. I'm just using the pen tool to trace around one half of it. And then I duplicate it, mirror it horizontally. There's no shortcut key for that unless you set it in your own menu. And then what you do is you select the mirror and the original and you unionize it in the combined paths, Control-Alt-U. Then you want to do the same thing for the little back pieces. There you go. Select those and then join them in a composite path. Go into the Shape submenu and select the Rectangle tool now. Again, Alt key is your friend. You drag it out from the center, bam, you have your rectangle. Now you just resize it to your liking, and you move it up a little. There you go. That's where you're going to have your particular title name. Now, what you want to do is you want to duplicate that. You want to make the bottom one. You want to make the bottom one with an inner bevel and an inset emboss. And the inner bevel should be set to inset or inverted, and the emboss, well, should also be 90 degrees. Alright, now we want a logo. So I'm opening up the CGC logo. I'm selecting it and I am copying it and pasting it. Now, you want to give it either a raised emboss or an outer bevel. You don't want to give it both. See what I did there? That's an outer bevel. Now, I want to make it look a little cooler, so I selected the white, select similar, and then new layer via copy, and then I gave it an inner bevel set to inset or invert. You could also give it an inset emboss. That might work too, and that's how it looks even cooler now. Now we're going to type our text. I'm going to make the CGC tag team titles right here. Now, I'm not a big fan of resizing it via the transform tool, I would just rather change the text size, the font size, which you can do on the bottom. But here, just like Payne did, we're transforming it. Now, you probably want to have the champion on the bottom banner, so you want to make sure the banner is a little bigger so that the word champion is more visible. So you resize them and just make sure it's all visible there. Now, between this and a little, see, I just typed the word champion between the last frame and this one. Now, what you want to do is you want to make a path using the pen tool. You curve it in the bottom center, and now you select the path and the word champion that you just typed. I use avant-garde bold. Now, you want you to do Control-Shift-Y, which will attach the word champion to the path. You manipulate the word so that it fits better on the path. You manipulate the path points using the white arrow on the top right in your tools section, making sure it's symmetrical, otherwise it'll just look really weird. Now, you experiment with the text now, I prefer text vertical, it just looks better. Now, you want to select your tag team and your champion, and you want to give them a raised emboss, setting them to 90 degrees and whatever thing you... You have a plate, but it looks pretty bare. So now we're going to put in the little tattoos that Payne put in his. So I happen to have the font. I believe it's called Tattoo. Now, the E character is for the dragon that he used, and the S, the lowercase s, is for that, you know, nice little arrow wingy thingy. There you go. Now, you make a big one. You make an arrow, you make it 96 font size, and then you rotate it 90 degrees, and then you put it, you resize it however you want. Then you duplicate it, you flip it horizontally, and then you shift drag to the right so that it's roughly in the same place on the right side. Now you want to do an inset emboss on both layers. See what I did there? There's inset emboss. Make sure 90 degrees once again. Other settings you could have whatever you want. And then you put the dragon. Again, lowercase e. And then you make that inset emboss just as well. Make sure that your text is black. You know, you want it to pop on your belt. Okay, so once you've got that done, now you take the white arrow, you select your two side points at the same time. You want to kind of manipulate your points a little further so that you have, you know, any last minute tweaking. So now what you do is you take your frame layer, your belt layer, and your logo layer. You duplicate them, then you deselect your logo layer, and then you want to just have your plate and your frame layers selected. And then what you want to do is you want to resize them. You want to transform, and then you use the Alt key so that it transforms from the top and the bottom. Now, thankfully, in Fireworks, if you drag by the corner, then it'll resize both height and width proportionally, because that's how the default options are set. Then you take the logo and then you duplicate them. You duplicate it, you shift drag over to the left, and now see what I'm doing here is I'm taking the plate layer. I'm duplicating it because I'm going to use that for my shine on the side layers. I'm resizing it a little so that it's just over the frame, maybe a little more, who knows. I'll tweak it a little bit later. You want to have it so that it's just over the frame, and then you duplicate it. You put it on top of your frame layer, and then you duplicate it, and then you move it over to on top of the right side plate. Now you want to do the same thing for your center plate. So what you do is you take your center bottom plate, and then you duplicate it. You resize it a little. You move it over using your keyboard so that you have finer control, and then you move it on top of your frame layer. See, there you go. Now you have 3 solid plates, which looks like you haven't done any work yet. You deselect the inner bevel, because you don't want any inner bevel on this. And then you give yourself the gradient. You set your fill to gradient bars, and then you set your colors to a dark gray and a lighter gray, preferably going from top to middle, which will then repeat from middle to bottom. Then what you do is you select the 3 layers, you group them using Control G, and then what you do is you set that group to soft light or hard light, and then that'll make the bottom look much better, more like a real shiny belt, much like Payne did. Payne used hard light, but you know, you kind of want to tweak it a little. Now it's time to make our belt leather, the leather that's gonna go behind everything and really make it look like a belt. Okay, so what you do is you switch to your rectangle tool if you haven't already switched to it. You alt drag from the center. Make sure it's 900 pixels wide and 160 pixels tall from the center. Now what you're gonna do is you're gonna set it to sandpaper texture at 25. You give it any color you want, And then what you do is you take that gradient layer you have, you duplicate that, and you set the fill to the same color and texture as the leather. Then you select the fill and the leathers, and then what you do is you make them union. And then what I'm doing here with the white arrows, I'm deleting points, because now I'm just going to manipulate the points so that the leather looks better. See? Now the leather looks a whole lot better. It looks savable. Now, you have your leather layer. I'm going to view it on 25% just to see how the finished product will look. Now, you take your duplicate of your leather, and then you set the texture to grain 100% transparent, and then you give it an inner bevel, but you have it do inset or inverted. Then you duplicate the layer again, you give it no fill, you give it a stroke, and you give the inner bevel raised. And then what you want to do is make sure your stroke is centered on path or outside of path. Now, once you have your centered beveled stroke, what you do is you want to duplicate that. And then what you want to do is you want to set the stroke to inside path. And then you want to change it to, well, I made a preset, but you go to confetti, and then you go to stroke options. Now, what you see, it looks a little weird now. What you do is you turn off every other option you possibly can, except you make spacing 100%. Now, you'll notice that it gives it what's known as a scallop tooling. Now, you're gonna want to save this preset in your layer styles. You're gonna want to save this preset, and you give it an inner bevel, you give it inset or inverted depending on how much contrast you want it to have with your belt leather. Now, the professional belt makers like Joe Marshall, Reggie Parks, Dave Milliken, they use this kind of tooling. They use the scallop quote-unquote tooling. Now, finally, with your belt, you want to duplicate the bottom layer, and you want to make it, well, hopefully you saved your bars gradient as a preset. So you click your bars gradient, now it's filled with a gradient. You put it on top of all your other pieces of leather, and then you set it to soft light or hard light, and then it'll give your leather a nice little shine, and then you're done with your leather. Now it's time to put the entire product together. And now you have what basically it looks like a professionally done belt leather. You select your leather, all your leather layers, group them. Now you select each plate layer separately. You select the layer with the center plate, you group that. You select the layer with the first side plate, you group that. You select the layer with the second side plate, you group that. Now, what you want to do is you want to duplicate all these groups and make sure they're all on the very top. Now, you've got your plates grouped, you've got your leather grouped, and now you've got your duplicate group. Now, what you want to do is you take all your duplicate groups, you select them, you group them together, 6 objects right there. And then what you do is you go under the transform menu, and then you click flatten selection. Now you have a bitmap. Now that's what you're going to put onto your belt background. You make a new document, 200 by 100 on a transparent canvas. This is the background I ended up making. I'll have it available for anybody. You make a 1 pixel thick black frame around the top. You copy and you paste your belt. I did a numeric transform, Control-Shift-T, because I was doing it on this little size of a window. You resize your belt to your liking. There you go. You just move it around with your keyboard a little, and now you have a belt that you want to save. You go under your file menu, you go into image preview, your export. You see JPEG 100, you click your export button and then you save it. See, I saved the CGC tag team up there. You do that, and hey, maybe you'll be able to make as many belts as this guy has, right? How about that?